Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Origins. Today we're going to be looking at Elekid, Electabuzz and Electivire, so let's get started. Obviously starting off with Elekid, we can see that its Japanese name is also Elekid, so no change there. It is the electric Pokemon and number 239 in the National Dex. It stands at 0.6 meters or 2 foot tall and weighs 23.5 kilograms or 51.8 pounds. Elekid is an electric type, and for those who didn't know, this evolution line is actually my favourite, with Elekid being sort of my most favourite, but I also have a nice soft spot for Electabuzz and Electivire as well. So, Elekid is a yellow, round-bodied Pokemon with black stripes. Its arms are bulky in proportion to its body, and it has 3 claws instead of fingers. It has 2 stripes on its arms which wrap all the way around them, and there are 2 horns on top of its head that resemble the prongs of a plug, complete with the holes in their sides. Elekid also has a black lightning bolt marking on its chest. 2 rows of stripes are near the marking, with the pattern continuing around its lower back. Its legs are black and its feet are yellow again and are rounded and toeless. Simply put, Elekid is based off of a US and Japanese domestic AC power plug, with its horns obviously representing the prongs, as I've said earlier. There are no gender differences between Elekid, and Elekid's shiny form is, in Generation 5, lighter than its normal form. Pokédex entries tell us that Elekid like to play in thunderstorms, and also that they spin their arms around to recharge themselves. The name Elekid is most likely a combination of Eleki, meaning electric, or of course just electric as normal, and Kid, referring to its base stage. Then moving on to the sprite comparisons, we can see that when it was introduced in Generation 2, in Gold, Silver and Crystal, it's obviously the Gold sprite is the same as Crystal, apart from Crystal's slight animation, and Silver it seems to be just jumping up, so not much happening there. The back sprite is a simple sort of stance with its arms held up, ready to sort of, I assume, defend itself or launch off an attack. Strangely though, in Generation 2, Elekid's shiny form is a darker colour than its normal form, unlike how it is in Generation 5. We can see this by moving on to Generation 3, where we can see that the shiny form is indeed lighter than the normal form now. And in Ruby Sapphire, Emerald Fire and Leaf Green, it's got a simple stance really, with one arm raised and one sort of going out to the side. In Emerald it flashes a bit, but apart from that, it raises its arms to its head, but that's really it. The back sprite is, like many of the 3rd generation sprites, just a recolouring of the Generation 2 back sprite. Then moving on to Generation 4, we can see that between Diamond, Pearl and Platinum, it simply dances around, hopping from one foot to the other over the games. Then in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it's got a steady stance with both arms raised up, probably looking menacing or ready to fire off an attack as usual. Then the back sprite is slightly different to the previous ones, with its arms held outwards, and you can see the majority of its body here. Finally, in Generation 5, you can see it carries over the same stance from Heart Gold and Soul Silver, except now during the animation it kind of switches between arms, left, right, and then raises the arms to its head at some point to probably charge itself. And then the back sprite is as you would expect a back sprite to be, simply Elekid's back, not really much happening there. Finally now we can look at Elekid's size. Being 2 foot or 0.6 meters tall, it's a medium sized Pokemon, not huge but then again not too small either. So about the same size as Pikachu, I would guess. So, now if we move on to look at Electabuzz. Electabuzz's Japanese name is Elebu, so similar but not quite the same. It is also the electric Pokemon, and number 125 in the National Dex, obviously being introduced in Generation 1 rather than Generation 2 like Elekid. Electabuzz is 1.1 meters or 3 foot 7 inches tall, and weighs 30 kilograms or 66.1 pounds. Electabuzz is a pure electric type, and as I've mentioned already, is one of my favourite Pokemon. And Elekid will evolve into an Electabuzz starting at level 30. So, Electabuzz is a slightly humanoid creature with some feline traits. It is covered in yellow fur with black stripes, with a large stripe on its chest shaped like a lightning bolt. It also has a long tail. There are 3 clawed toes on its feet, 2 in the front and 1 in the back. while it has 5 fingers on each hand. Electabuzz has 2 sharp fangs and a pair of antennae with bulbous ends. In the dark, Electabuzz will glow a light blue with the electrical charge stored inside it. Electabuzz is likely based on one of the Japanese Oni, who was a horned ogre who wore tiger skin and was sometimes depicted as a god of thunder and lightning. Its tail looks like that of a tiger's, as they are fairly similar with the stripes. Like Elekid, there are no gender differences between Electabuzz, and Electabuzz's shiny form, unlike Elekid, is darker than its normal form. As you remember, Elekid was lighter than its normal form, whereas Electabuzz is darker. Pokédex entries tell us that Electabuzz likes to feed on electricity, and also that it windmills its arms to slightly boost its punching power. The name Eleboo is a combination of electric and bun, which means buzz. Electabuzz, likewise, is a combination of electric and buzz, which possibly refers to the humming sound of electricity you can get if it's a big build-up of it. Then looking at sprites throughout the ages, obviously being introduced as Generation 1 as I've already said. In red and green, its sprite is it's pretty decent actually for a red-green sprite, with its arms raised above its head. Then in red and blue, it shifts its pose slightly with putting one arm down to its hip, and then in yellow it's coming at the player or the camera with a punch and another hand outstretched. The back sprite here is pretty much just like its red and green sprite with its arms raised up. In Generation 2, we can see that in gold and silver it has different sprites as usual. In gold having one arm up and one arm sort of like parallel to the ground, and then the other one being sort of like screaming at the camera, I guess you could say. Then in crystal it changes its sprite completely, and just pretty much like almost similar to the red and green sprite, however its arms are a bit lower down, and its movement is obviously just a bit of a cry and some flashing bulbous arm antenna things. Then the back sprite is a simple sort of standing up with its head and a bit of its tail and some of its body there. Then in Generation 3, we can see in Ruby, Sapphire and Emerald, it's I think similar to the gold sprite with one arm up, one arm down. It seems to be a lot lighter colour than it is in the majority of the other games here, being a sort of pale yellow cream colour, whereas the other ones are a deep yellow. Then in Fire and Leaf Green, we can see its colour here indeed does change to a more of a yellow colour, and it's very similar to, I'd say, Silver sprite here, with its arms sort of going down and screaming at the camera. The back sprite is again a recoloration of the Generation 2 sprite. Then in Generation 4, we can see that in Diamond Pearl, it's sort of like got one arm up, it's a mix of some of the other ones really. 2 arms up, 1 leg raised as it's going to stomp on the ground or do a cry of some sort. Then in Platinum it actually does stomp on the ground and sort of just holds that position really, not doing much else. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, its arms are outstretched as if just sort of running or preparing to run and punch sort of thing. And the back sprite there is a bit better than the previous ones, where as you can see it's majority of its back now and its arms raised up ready to fight and its head again. Then in Generation 5 it keeps, I'd say, a mix between the Diamond, Pearl and Platinum sprites, whereas it's sort of like in the middle. With its arms slightly raised, its arms seem to be a bit slimmer than they were in the previous games, and its animation is sort of just the arms going up and down, and then it actually does do a little scream at some point, and its tail also goes up as well. The back sprite is, as you'd expect with many back sprites, the full back. You can see a majority of this Pokemon we haven't seen beforehand. Finally, looking at size now, we can see that standing at 1.1 meters or 3 foot 7 inches, Electabuzz is a medium-sized Pokemon, taller than Elekid but still not quite the same size as Ash. But then again, with its fangs and its obviously electric powers, you would not want to meet this guy around. Finally for today, let us move on to Electivire. Electivire's Japanese name is Elekid. It is the Thunderbolt Pokemon and number 466 in the National Dex, being introduced in Generation 4. It stands at 1.8 meters or 5 foot 11 inches and weighs 138.6 kilograms or 305.6 pounds. Like its pre-evolutions, it is a pure electric type, and as I've already said, one of my favourite Pokemon, and evolves from Electabuzz when it is traded holding an Electrizer. Electivire is a humanoid creature covered in yellow fur with black stripes. It appears to lack a neck and has red eyes, a black spot on its forehead, and a pair of antennae with bulbous tips. A pattern on Electivire's back resembles an electric outlet, as we will see later on. The fur on its cheeks and shoulders is spiky and ruffled, going around its shoulder area and obviously neck, or where the neck would be. Its two black tails have red tips on them and seem to be based on sort of electric wires. Electivire has black feet with 3 clawed toes and 5 black fingers on each of its hands. Electivire was likely based on a gorilla due to it being 2-legged and having hairy features. It may also be based on a yeti though, an ape-like cryptid that was said to inhabit the Himalayan mountains. Unlike a gorilla, it can walk with its large bare feet, much like how an Electivire can. Its motor drivability is also similar to an electric motor. There are no gender differences between Electivire, and Shiny Electivire, much like Shiny Electabuzz, are darker than their normal form, and Shiny Electivire also have blue eyes and blue tail tips. Pokédex entries tell us that Electivire can have blue sparks crackling between its antennae as its electric charge gets larger, and also that it can send over 20,000 volts of electricity into a foe using its tails. The name Elekid may be a combination of electric or electricity and cable. Electivire is a combination of electric or electricity again and wire, referring to its cord-like tails, and may also derive from live wire, which is a wire in which electric current flows, as electric flows through Electivire. Then onto the sprite comparison here, we can see that in Generation 4 when it was introduced, in Diamond and Pearl, it's, sort of reaching for the enemy, the camera, whatever you want to call that, not doing much really. Then in Platinum, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, it gets much more of a stance, with its 2 arms raised, ready to sort of run at the foe and attack, I would assume. The back sprite here, as I mentioned earlier, you can easily see the power outlet on its back, and you can see sort of its head, what you would call, and half of its back. Then in Generation 5, it sort of has a mix of the Diamond and Pearl sprite and the Platinum, Heart Gold and Soul Silver sprite, sort of just standing there, not doing a whole lot. Then in the animated form, we can see that it jumps around a fair bit actually. It's moving its arms as well, and its tail tips do like to sort of hit themselves together, as obviously they contain electric, so that's what you'd assume. The back sprite, we can now see the whole of its back, especially where its tails come from, which just seems to be a point on its lower back. So, finally looking at the size comparison here, we can see at 1.8 meters or 5 foot 11 inches, Electivire is almost the same size as me, just 1 foot short. It's taller than Ash, and obviously both of its pre-evolutions, so it's a fairly large Pokemon really. So guys, that's it for this episode of Pokemon Origins. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be seeing you guys next time. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a like and comment, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. Bye guys.